Luke had always lived a quiet life on his family's small ranch on the edge of the Arizona desert. Most people in town knew him as the soft-spoken cowboy who kept his head down, did his work, and tried to avoid attention. He wasn't the kind of man who bragged, argued, or looked for trouble. He spent his mornings checking on the cattle, his afternoons repairing fences or hauling hay, and his evenings sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the wind move through the dry grass. It was a simple life, sometimes lonely, but he accepted it. One warm afternoon, when the sun was still high and the town's main street shimmered with heat, Luke rode into town to pick up supplies. The general store was always busy at this hour, ranchers buying tools, families buying food, children running around barefoot. Luke tied his horse outside, stepped down slowly, and walked toward the store's entrance with his usual quiet steps. Before he reached the door, he noticed something unusual happening by the side of the trading post. A tall woman, taller than any woman he had seen in this town, was trying to lift a large wooden crate. The crate looked heavy, almost too heavy for one person to carry. Luke paused and watched for a moment, wondering if she needed help, but not wanting to intrude. The woman was Apache, dressed in traditional clothing mixed with simple work attire. Her long dark hair was braided down her back, and her shoulders were broad from years of carrying responsibility. She towered over most men around her, and several townsfolk stared at her as they passed. Some whispered, some simply avoided getting too close. Luke didn't know her name yet, but she immediately caught his attention, not because of her height, but because she looked like someone who carried a lot of weight on her heart, not just in her hands. She tried again to lift the crate, her brows tightening in frustration. Luke hesitated only a second before walking toward her. "Ma'am, can I help you with that?" His voice was soft, careful, almost shy. The woman blinked, surprised. Most men avoided speaking to her unless they absolutely had to. She studied Luke's face, expecting fear or discomfort, but she saw none. Just quiet kindness. "I don't want to trouble you," she replied gently. "It's no trouble," he said, already stepping forward. She moved aside, allowing him to grip the wooden edges. Luke bent his knees and lifted. The crate was heavy, but he had spent years doing ranch work. His arms tightened, and with one steady motion, he raised it off the ground. The woman watched, impressed that someone his size lifted it so cleanly. "Where do you need it?" Luke asked. "Inside the post," she replied. He carried the crate through the doorway as people watched. Some whispered again, not at her, but at him. Luke didn't pay attention. He simply placed the crate where she pointed and wiped the dust from his hands. She stepped closer. "Thank you. I'm Naja." Luke nodded. "Luke," she gave a small smile, and it was the first natural smile she had shown to anyone in town in weeks. Luke wasn't sure what to say next. He glanced toward the door, thinking maybe he should leave before he made things awkward. But Naya spoke first. "You didn't have to help," she said softly. "You look like you needed an extra pair of hands." Luke answered with a quiet shrug. Most people would have said something clumsy or nervous when standing next to someone as tall and strong as Naya. But Luke didn't act that way. He was calm, polite, and sincere. That caught her by surprise. She walked with him outside. "You're from the ranch near the desert ridge. How'd you know?" he asked. "You fix your fences early in the morning?" "I pass near there when I go to trade," she explained. Luke rubbed the back of his neck shyly. He wasn't used to people noticing his routines. "I guess I do." Naya picked up a smaller basket she had set aside. "My younger brother and I live in the settlement nearby. I come to town every few days for supplies." Luke nodded. "I've seen you around," and he added quickly. "Just in town, I mean. Not following you." She laughed softly, a warm and unexpected sound. "I didn't think you were." Luke felt his ears warm. Good. They stood there for a moment, not quite knowing how to end the conversation. The breeze carried dust across the road, and the sound of horses clopping filled the silence. Naya finally lifted her basket and said, "I should get going."
"Hey,"
Luke replied. "Take care on the road." "You too, Luke," she said, giving him one last smile before walking away. After she left, Luke stood there longer than he meant to, watching her figure disappear down the path. Something about her stayed in his mind, the strength she carried, the quiet sadness in her eyes, and the surprising warmth behind her guarded expression. Over the next week, Luke found himself thinking about her while working on the ranch. He wasn't sure why she stayed on his mind. Maybe because she was different from everyone else he knew. Maybe because he sensed she carried heavy responsibilities, just like he did. Maybe because her smile, even though small, had softened something inside him that had felt locked away for a long time. A week later, fate placed them in the same place again. Luke was stacking hay. Bales outside the feed store when he heard someone speaking softly behind him. "Do you always work this hard?" He turned and saw Naya standing there, holding 2 woven baskets. The sun highlighted the calm strength in her expression. Luke smiled slightly, brushing dust from his shirt. "Someone has to." "I see why you lifted that crate so easily," she said. "Well, I try." He didn't want to sound like he was bragging. "Would you like help?" She offered. Luke almost dropped the hay bale out of surprise. "Help?" "You don't need to." "I know," she said with a small grin. "But I offered," so she helped him stack a few bales. Naya worked with effortless strength, and Luke found himself relaxing around her more than he expected. They talked as they worked slowly at first, then more comfortably. She told him a little about her brother, a boy she had been raising since their parents passed away. She talked about the long responsibility of being the strongest in her family, the person who must carry heavy things, solve problems, and protect others. Luke listened quietly, his gentle nature making it easy for her to speak. He told her about his father's illness and how ranch work had become harder, lonelier, and quieter. She listened without interrupting. There was no pressure in their conversation, no expectations. Just 2 lives that rarely touched, finding a moment of understanding. When the work was done, Naya brushed hay from her clothes and asked, "Will you be in town again soon?" Luke's answer came out softer than he intended. "Maybe if you're around." She smiled at that, a real smile this time, clear, warm, and grateful. "I'm around more than people think," she said. Then she lifted her baskets and walked away down the road. Luke watched her leave again, feeling something warm settle in his chest. He didn't know her well yet, but he already knew this. Naya wasn't someone he would forget easily. Her presence was strong, but her quiet moments were even stronger. And although she walked with confidence, he sensed that she carried a loneliness similar to his own. As he rode home that day, the sky turning orange behind the desert hills, Luke realized something unusual. He was looking forward to seeing her again. For the first time in a long while, the days ahead felt a little less empty. He didn't know where this connection would lead, but he knew one thing for sure: their story had just begun. The next few weeks passed slowly, but each day brought Luke and Naya a little closer, even though neither of them planned it. Life in the desert towns moved at its own pace. Some days were quiet, some were filled with work, and some surprised people when they least expected it. That was how it happened for the shy cowboy and the strong Apache woman. Luke started noticing things he had never paid attention to before, like which days Naya usually came to town, or which path she took from the settlement. He didn't wait for her, but whenever he caught a glimpse of her tall figure walking toward the trading post, something inside him felt lighter. He couldn't explain it. Maybe that was because she didn't make him feel judged or small. Most people talked over him, but she listened. Most people ignored him, but she remembered his words. One afternoon, after finishing the morning work on the ranch, Luke rode into town again. His father was having one of his quiet days, resting inside the small wooden house. So Luke used the chance to buy some tools and new reins for the horses. When he reached the main road, he spotted Naya near the water well, filling 2 large clay jugs. She looked tired, as if the past few days had been heavy on her shoulders. Luke climbed down from his horse and walked toward her, dust rising with each step. "Need help?" he asked. Naya looked up, and for a moment she didn't speak. Then a faint smile appeared. "You always know when to ask." He picked up one of the jugs and placed it on his horse's saddle. "Where do you want it delivered?" "My brother's place," she answered. He's feeling unwell today. Luke's expression softened. I hope it isn't serious. He gets fevers sometimes, she explained. I can handle it, but the walk is long with these jars. Let me take one, Luke said. Already preparing his horse? She hesitated, not because she didn't trust him, but because she wasn't used to people helping her. She had always carried the weight alone. But seeing the calm in Luke's eyes, she nodded. They walked side by side toward the settlement, the path stretching across dry desert ground with scattered shrubs. Luke's horse followed behind slowly. The breeze was warm and carried the faint smell of sagebrush. Naya walked with long steps, but she slowed her pace so Luke wouldn't have to rush. Luke noticed this small gesture and appreciated it quietly. After a few minutes of silence, Naya spoke. People talk in town. Luke gave a small nod. They always do. They say we spend time together, she continued, her voice quiet. Luke didn't know what to say at first. His heart thumped a little faster, but he kept his voice steady. Does that bother you? No, she replied honestly. But I wonder if it bothers you. Luke shook his head. People talk whether you do something or not. I don't mind. For the first time that day, Naya breathed a little easier. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. You're different from others, Luke. I don't know about that, he said, embarrassed. It's true, she said. Most cowboys look at me with fear or with pride. You don't show either. You're just yourself. Luke wasn't used to compliments. He felt his ears turn warm. I just treat people how I wish to be treated. And I looked at him thoughtfully, noticing the kindness behind his shy nature. As they walked deeper into the desert trail, the air grew quieter. The sun began to sink lower, turning the sky gold. Then, out of nowhere, Naya stopped walking. Luke paused too. Everything okay? She stood still for a moment, her face thoughtful, like she was deciding whether to say something or not. Then she spoke slowly, her voice lower than before, almost fragile. Luke, I haven't been close to anyone in 6 months. Luke didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He simply listened. Naya's eyes drifted toward the wide desert sky as she continued. Life has been hard. Since our parents passed, I've been taking care of my brother alone. I wake up early, work all day, trade for supplies, help him when he's sick. People expect me to be strong all the time. They think because I'm tall and strong, I don't get tired. They forget I'm human too. Luke's heart tightened. He understood the feeling of carrying quiet burdens. You don't have to explain yourself, he said gently. But she continued, needing to let out the words she had held for too long. I try to be strong, but sometimes the days feel endless. I don't talk to many people, Luke. Not because I don't want to, but because it feels like no one really listens. Her voice softened even more. Being close to others? Talking, sharing, trusting. I haven't had that in a long time. Luke stepped a little closer, not to invade her space, but to show he was there. His voice was steady and warm. You deserve someone who listens. Naya looked at him again, her eyes calm, not fearful. Do you really mean that? Luke nodded. Yes. She smiled, tired, honest, and touched. Thank you. They resumed walking, but the silence between them felt different now. It was comfortable, warm, like the kind shared between two people who finally understood something about each other. When they reached the settlement, Naya's younger brother, Tony, was sitting outside, wrapped in a blanket. The boy looked weak, but his eyes brightened when he saw Naya return. Luke handed him the water jar gently. Hope you feel better soon, he said. Tony nodded, grateful. Naya walked Luke a few steps away from the hut. You didn't have to come all the way. I wanted to, he replied simply. She looked at him closely. Luke didn't stare back. He was too shy for that. But she could see honesty in his lowered eyes and the way his hands rested calmly by his sides. You're not like others, she repeated softly. You make it easy to talk. Easier than I expected, Luke swallowed, feeling both nervous and strangely hopeful. I'm glad. She stepped back toward the hut, but before entering, she turned to him again. If you come to town tomorrow, I'll be around. Luke nodded. I'll be there. As he rode away from the settlement, He kept replaying her words in his mind. She trusted him enough to share something personal, something she hadn't shared with anyone else. It made him feel protective of her, but also honored. He didn't know what their connection meant yet, but he knew it was real. And rare, the next day, Luke returned to town early. He didn't want to admit he was eager to see her, but the truth was clear in his actions. When he arrived, Naya was already waiting near the trading post. She lifted her hand in greeting. He felt a warmth rise in him. They spent the day walking along the desert trail behind the town. They talked more deeply than before about their childhoods, their families, their fears, and the quiet hopes they rarely shared. Naya told him stories of her tribe, of the land, of traditions her mother had taught her. Luke listened admiringly, taking in each word. Luke shared stories of the ranch, of growing up with little but learning to work hard. He didn't talk much about his emotions, but Naya could read the silence in between his words. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple, they sat on a rock ledge overlooking the valley. Naya looked at him quietly. "You make the days feel lighter, Luke. I didn't expect that." Luke looked down at his hands, shy as always. "You make them lighter, too." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them fell silent except for the wind moving gently through the dry grass. And in that peaceful silence, something unspoken passed between them, a growing bond that neither of them dared to name yet, but both of them felt. The days that followed were calmer for both Luke and Naya, but the peace did not last long. Life in a small western town was rarely quiet for too long, especially when people noticed something unusual. It's like a shy cowboy spending time with the strongest Apache woman anyone had ever seen. Whispers spread fast. People talked in the saloon, in the store, and even on the dusty road. At first, Luke ignored it, but soon the looks became too frequent to pretend he didn't notice. Luke tried to continue his usual routines. He woke early, fed the horses, checked fences, and helped his father when the older man had trouble standing. But every time he rode into town, he felt a few eyes turning toward him. Some looks were surprised, some curious, and some a bit unfriendly. Naya noticed it too. She could feel the glances when she walked beside Luke, and she sensed how they made him uncomfortable. She didn't blame him. Most people weren't used to seeing someone like her so close to someone like him. But she also knew that if gossip kept growing, Luke would be the one who suffered more. She was used to people judging her, but Luke was gentle and private. She didn't want her presence to bring trouble to his doorstep. One evening, Luke was tying his horse outside the general store when a group of 4 local cowboys approached him. They were loud, restless, and smelled of days spent in the sun. Luke recognized 2 of them from nearby ranches. He had never had trouble with them before, but tonight their expressions were different, half amused, half mocking. Well, one of them said with a grin. "If it isn't the quiet ranch boy." Luke didn't respond. He didn't like confrontations, and he never knew how to talk when people approached him like this. He simply nodded politely and reached for his saddlebag. Another cowboy stepped closer. "We heard you got yourself a new friend," he said, his tone teasing. "A tall one." A few of them laughed. Luke felt his throat tighten. He didn't want to argue, but he also didn't want to give them anything to laugh at. One of the cowboys nudged another and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Maybe he needs someone big to protect him." Luke felt the heat rise in his chest. Not anger, embarrassment. He hated being the center of attention. Before he could reply, a calm voice spoke from behind them. "That's enough." The cowboys turned around. Naya stood there, tall and steady, her expression firm but controlled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply stood with the confidence of someone who had nothing to fear from the world. The cowboys shifted uncomfortably. One of them opened his mouth as if to argue, but when Naya stepped forward, his courage faded. "We were just joking," one of the men muttered. Naya shook her head. "Jokes don't make someone feel small unless they are meant to," she said. The cowboys fell silent, and after a moment of awkwardness, they backed away and returned to the saloon. Luke let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Naya looked at him. "You okay?" He nodded, trying to hide his embarrassment. "I didn't want anyone to see that." "Luke," she said softly, "they were wrong to speak to you that way." "You didn't do anything wrong. You had to step in," he said quietly. "I stepped in because I wanted to," she replied. "Not because you needed me to." Luke didn't know what to say. He looked at the ground, his hands tightening around his saddle strap. He didn't like conflict, and he didn't like feeling weak. But Naya didn't see him that way. She saw strength in different forms. After a quiet moment, Naya spoke again. "Let's walk somewhere peaceful." Luke followed her out of town. They walked along a familiar trail behind the trading post that led toward the riverbank. The night air was cooler now, and the moon began to rise over the desert hills. When they reached the river, they sat on a fallen log. The sound of running water filled the silence around them, making the moment feel calm again. Luke finally spoke. "I don't want to be trouble for you." Naya shook her head. "You're not trouble. But people talk because of me," he said. "No," she corrected gently. "People talk because they don't understand us. That's not your fault." Luke looked up at her, studying the strength in her calm expression. "Does it not bother you?" "It used to," she admitted. "Long ago, it hurt me. But I learned that people fear what they do not know. They whisper because it's easier than learning the truth." Luke nodded slowly. "I'm not used to being talked about." "I know," she said, "and I won't let anyone make you feel small." He glanced up at her again. "I don't understand how you stay so strong." She turned her eyes toward the river. "Because I had to. When my parents passed, I didn't have time to be weak. My brother needed me, my tribe needed me, and the world expected me to carry everything. I didn't choose strength. It chose me." Luke listened closely, recognizing the depth behind each word. "But strength," she continued, "is not only in standing tall, it's also in patience, kindness, and honesty. You have that, Luke. You don't shout. You don't push people. You choose calmness. That's strength of its own kind." Luke felt something warm settle in his heart. Naya's words didn't feel like praise. They felt like truth. He looked out at the river and said, "When you talk, everything feels clearer." Naya smiled softly at that. "And when I talk to you," she said, "I feel peaceful." They sat quietly, letting the evening settle around them. The sky above grew darker, dotted with stars. A soft breeze moved across the water. After a long silence, Luke asked, "Do you regret talking to me that first day?" Naya turned to him, her voice gentle. "No. That day changed something in my life. It gave me someone to trust." Luke's heart tightened slightly this time, not with worry, but with emotion. "You trust me?" "Yes," she said simply. "You listen when I speak. You never judge. And when I'm with you, the world feels less heavy." Luke felt warmth rising inside him, a feeling he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I feel that way too," he admitted. "With you?" Their eyes met, and in that moment, neither of them needed to say anything more. The bond between them, once small and fragile, has grown deep and steady. Before they left the river, Naya reached out and gently touched Luke's arms, just a small gesture, but filled with meaning. He didn't pull away. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of comfort he had not felt in years. They walked back toward town together, the moonlight guiding their steps. People would still talk, Luke knew that. But now he felt something different, something stronger than fear or embarrassment. He felt connected to someone who understood him in ways no one else had, and Naya felt the same. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone in her burdens. She had someone who walked beside her, not because he needed her strength, but because he appreciated her heart. Their bond was growing. Slowly but surely, carried by honesty, respect, and understanding, and neither of them knew it yet. But the next part of their story would become even more meaningful. The next morning began quietly, but something felt different for both Luke and Naya. Neither of them said it out loud, yet both sensed that their bond had reached a place that could not be ignored or pushed aside. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a slow, warm feeling like the way dawn light touches the desert hills before anyone else wakes. Luke woke early, as he always did, but for the first time in months, he felt a sense of energy instead of heaviness. His father was resting comfortably, and the ranch chores were light that day. Luke moved through them with unusual calm, thinking about the river, the moonlit walk, and the way Naya had rested her hand on his arm. The memory stayed with him like a quiet promise. Naya, too, started her morning with a softer heart. She checked on her brother, prepared breakfast for him, and cleaned their simple home. But even as she swept the floor, she found her mind drifting back to Luke. She thought about the way he listened, how he never rushed her words, how he never looked at her with judgment or fear. She had spent years hiding her softer side, believing no one cared to see it. Yet Luke had seen it gently, without even trying. When noon approached, Luke decided he would ride to the settlement to check on Tony. He told himself it was just a help, just to be polite, but in truth he hoped to see Naya again. He saddled his horse, packed a small wooden box of herbs his father used for fevers, and headed toward the path he had traveled with her before. As he approached the settlement, he saw Naya standing outside, shaded under a tall juniper tree. She looked surprised but pleased to see him. Luke raised a hand in greeting. "I brought something for your brother," he said quietly. She stepped forward, her eyes softening. "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," he replied honestly. She paused, studying his humble expression. "I'm glad." They walked to the hut together. Tony was sitting near the doorway, wrapped in a warm blanket, but looking brighter today. Luke knelt down and handed him the herbs, explaining how to boil them to make tea. The boy nodded with gratitude. After checking on him, Naya led Luke away so Tony could rest. They walked toward the edge of the settlement, where a small hill overlooked the vast open desert. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of warm earth and sagebrush. They stood side by side, watching the horizon. After a moment, Naya spoke quietly, almost as if she was talking to the sky instead of him. "Luke yesterday made me think." He looked at her, waiting. "I'm used to standing alone," she continued. "People expect me to be strong all the time. And I am strong, but sometimes I don't want to carry everything alone." Luke's throat tightened with silent understanding. Naya continued, her voice steady but vulnerable. "When you stood beside me last night, it felt like something changed. Not just for me, but for us." Luke breathed in slowly, courage building inside him despite his usual shyness. "It changed for me too." She turned to him, her tall figure framed by the sunlight. "Do you regret walking with me? Defending me? Being seen with me?" "No," Luke said immediately. "I'd never regret that." Her eyes softened further. "I've never met someone who makes me feel calm like you do. You don't see me as just strength or height. You see me." Luke's heartbeat thumped gently, but he didn't look away. "That's because you're not just strong. You're kind. You're honest. You care deeply for people." "That's what I see." Naya breathed out slowly, letting those words sink in. For a long time, no one had spoken to her like that, gently, sincerely. Without any fear or motive, they began walking once more, heading toward a flat ridge at the edge of the desert. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows on the sand. Luke walked quietly, his hands lightly brushing the dry grass as he passed. Naya walked with steady steps, but her heart felt softer with every moment beside him. When they reached the ridge, they stopped again. The world below them stretched far in every direction, rolling hills of red earth, tall rocks reaching toward the sky, and a quiet stream winding between sagebrush. Naya looked out over the land. "I haven't told anyone this, Luke," she said, her voice quieter than he had ever heard it. "But 6 months ago, I shut myself away from others. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to trust. I didn't want to feel the weight of expecting anything from anyone." Luke listened silently. She looked toward him, her expression open and honest. "But then I met you. And suddenly the world didn't feel so heavy. I didn't expect that." Luke swallowed, searching for his own words. He wasn't used to speaking from the heart, but he didn't want to hide it from her. "I felt alone too," he said slowly. "I worked, ate, slept, repeating the same days. You brought light back into them." Naya's face softened, and a warm stillness formed between them. The wind slowed, almost as if it was listening. Luke looked down for a moment, then lifted his eyes again. I'm not someone who talks much, he said. But when you're around, oh, I want to. I want to talk to you, walk with you, help you, understand you. Aya's heart warmed. She rested her hand gently on his arm again, just like the night before. Luke didn't pull back this time. He leaned into the touch, calm and steady. Naya took a breath. Luke. Earlier, I told you I hadn't been close to anyone in 6 months? He nodded. She stepped a little closer, her voice softer than a whisper. But now, I feel close to you. Luke met her eyes. For a shy cowboy, he had never felt braver in his life. I feel close to you too. Their words hung in the air, not rushed, not forced. Just true. The sky turned orange and pink as the sun began to set. The peaceful light fell across the land, making everything feel gentle and full of promise. Naya and Luke stood there, side by side, watching the horizon together. For the first time in a long time, Luke didn't feel like he was walking alone. And for the first time in many years, Naya felt like someone truly understood her heart, not the strength she showed the world, but the quiet spirit she kept hidden inside as the sun dipped behind the hills. Naya turned to Luke again and repeated the words she once spoke with sadness but now spoke with quiet hope. I haven't been close to anyone in 6 months. Luke listened closely. Until I met you. He smiled, small, shy, but full of warmth. And I'll stay close, he said gently, as long as you want me to. Naya nodded, her voice steady. I do. They walked back toward the settlement slowly, their steps matching in quiet harmony. No rush, no pressure. Just two people who had finally found comfort in each other's presence. From that evening on, their paths were no longer separate. They weren't just an Apache woman and a shy cowboy, they were two hearts healing together, building something steady, honest, and full of understanding, and neither of them felt alone ever again.